For most of my life, I thought I was doing everything right. I followed advice. I listened to people who sounded confident. I copied what successful people said worked. And yet, nothing changed. I stayed busy, tired, and anxious, always one step away from progress that never arrived. Everyone around me believed the same things. Work harder. Be realistic. Don't take risks. Wait your turn. It sounded responsible. It sounded safe. But strangely, the people repeating these rules were not the ones winning. Money always seemed to appear somewhere else, to other people. People who didn't look smarter, didn't work longer hours, didn't follow the same rules. That contradiction quietly bothered me for years. The breaking point wasn't dramatic, no collapse, no rock bottom, just one ordinary moment where I realized something unsettling. If everyone is thinking the same way, competition is guaranteed, and opportunity is limited. I started paying attention not to advice, but to patterns. What successful people did differently when no one was watching. What they ignored, what they refused to spend time on. The differences were subtle, but consistent. They questioned things others accepted automatically. They didn't rush into crowded paths. They were comfortable looking wrong at first. Most importantly, they didn't confuse effort with value. That's when I noticed something uncomfortable about myself. I wasn't afraid of failure, I was afraid of standing out. Thinking differently meant risking judgment, and I had been avoiding that risk my entire life. So I made one decision. I stopped asking, "What do people usually do here?" and started asking, "What do people avoid doing here, and why?" That question changed everything. I stopped chasing popular opportunities, stopped copying trending strategies, stopped listening to people who had never built what I wanted. At first, nothing happened, which almost made me quit. But then something subtle shifted. I noticed fewer competitors, more silence, more space to think. And for the first time, money didn't feel like something to chase. It felt like something that appears when friction disappears. I began to see how normal thinking is formed, not through truth, but through repetition. School rewards obedience. Jobs reward predictability. Society rewards fitting in. Very few systems reward original thought. And yet, money flows toward originality. Most people don't choose their beliefs about money. They inherit them from parents who struggled, from friends who complained, from media that teaches fear disguised as responsibility. By the time we question these beliefs, they feel like facts. I realized something uncomfortable. I had been optimizing for comfort, not leverage. Comfort keeps you safe. Leverage changes outcomes. Money doesn't respond to effort alone. It responds to positioning. So I stopped asking how to work harder and started asking where effort was ignored. What problems do people complain about but never solve? What inefficiencies do they tolerate because that's how it is? Those gaps were everywhere. Most people rush toward crowded markets because they look validated. High competition feels safe, but safety and upside rarely live in the same place. The quieter the space, the more room there is to build. I tested small, asymmetric ideas, things that looked insignificant to others, projects that wouldn't impress anyone at a dinner table. They failed quietly, but they also taught me quickly. For the first time, failure felt useful, not emotional, not personal, just information. I wasn't betting my identity anymore, only my curiosity. Slowly, patterns emerged. Certain decisions produced disproportionate results, not because they were brilliant, but because few people bothered to think there. That's when money appeared for the first time in a way I didn't expect. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. Less stress, more control, clearer signals. I realized money isn't attracted to intelligence. It's attracted to clarity. When you stop copying and start choosing deliberately, resources begin to organize around your decisions. One of the biggest shifts was how I evaluated advice. I stopped asking whether it sounded smart and started asking whether it produced results. Many impressive ideas collapse when exposed to reality. I noticed that most people confuse motion with progress. They fill their days with tasks, meetings, planning, optimization, but very little of it changes their trajectory. I began protecting my attention aggressively. If something didn't compound, I removed it. If it didn't create leverage, I delayed it. This alone created more progress than working longer hours ever did. Thinking differently also meant accepting discomfort, uncertainty, loneliness, long periods with no external validation. Most people quit here, not because it doesn't work, but because it feels wrong. I stopped chasing permission, stopped waiting to feel ready, read less advice, ran more experiments. Momentum comes from interaction with reality, not preparation. I learned that markets reward usefulness, not effort. No one pays you for how hard something was, only for how much friction it removes. This reframed everything I built. Slowly, opportunities began to appear naturally. Introductions, inbound messages, unexpected demand. Not because I advertised myself, but because clarity attracts alignment. Money stopped feeling mysterious. It became a side effect, a signal that something I built was positioned correctly. That understanding reduced fear instantly. Ironically, the less I chased money, the more consistent it became. Focus shifted from outcome to structure. Good structures produce money automatically. Thinking differently didn't make me smarter. It made me calmer. And calm thinking sees opportunities that anxious thinking cannot. The biggest mistake I stopped making was trying to look busy. Busy is socially acceptable. Busy earns respect. But busy often hides the absence of direction. I replaced activity with intention. I stopped explaining my plans to people who weren't building anything. Not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. Advice from observers creates doubt. Advice from builders creates insight. Another shift was how I treated time. I stopped fragmenting it. No constant switching, no multitasking. Deep focus produced results that weeks of scattered effort never did. I realized most people are trapped by invisible ceilings. Income ceilings, lifestyle ceilings, belief ceilings. They don't notice them because everyone around them lives under the same limits. Once I saw those ceilings, I couldn't unsee them. Conversations repeated, complaints recycled, dreams postponed until later. It felt less like living and more like waiting. Thinking differently meant asking questions that felt uncomfortable. Why do I believe this? Who benefits if I keep believing it? What would break if this belief were false? Those questions quietly dismantled years of assumptions. Money began to feel less emotional, less tied to self-worth, less connected to approval. When fear leaves the equation, decisions improve instantly. I stopped trying to be impressive. Instead, I tried to be useful in narrow, specific ways. Specific usefulness scales better than vague brilliance. Progress accelerated when I accepted boredom. Real work is often repetitive, unsexy, invisible. Most people abandon it before results compound. At that point, income growth stopped feeling like luck. It felt mechanical. Clear thinking gives correct positioning, gives inevitable results. The pressure to return to normal never disappears. Friends question your choices. Family worries. Society rewards predictability and quietly punishes deviation. Thinking differently has a social cost. At times, it felt easier to pretend I was doing the same things as everyone else. Different thinking attracts attention, and attention invites judgment. Most people don't fail financially. They retreat socially. I noticed how often people self-correct back into the crowd. They glimpse an alternative, then talk themselves out of it. Not because it's wrong, but because it's lonely. Money doesn't require rebellion. It requires independence. That distinction matters. Rebellion reacts to others. Independence ignores them. I stopped measuring success against peers. Comparison distorts judgment. It pushes you toward crowded paths. The real benchmark became internal. Is this decision aligned with how value actually moves? As income stabilized, another illusion broke. Money didn't solve problems. It revealed which ones were real. Clarity increased responsibility. I understood why many people sabotage progress. Growth removes excuses. It forces ownership. Stagnation is painful, but familiar pain feels safer than unknown responsibility. Thinking differently isn't about intelligence. It's about tolerance. Tolerance for uncertainty, for delayed validation, for temporary invisibility. The people who get lucky usually endure this phase quietly. By the time others notice them, the hard part is already done. Overnight success is delayed recognition. That's when I fully understood the title of my own story. Money didn't appear because I chased it. It appeared because I finally stopped thinking like everyone else. Over time, I noticed something unexpected. The world didn't suddenly become easier. I simply stopped fighting it the wrong way. Problems didn't disappear, but my reactions changed. And reactions shape outcomes more than circumstances ever do. Thinking differently made me slower to speak and faster to decide. I no longer needed consensus or permission or applause. Clarity replaced urgency, and urgency had been draining me for years. I stopped confusing popularity with truth. Just because an idea is common doesn't mean it's correct. It usually means it's comfortable. Comfort spreads faster than accuracy. The more I trusted my own reasoning, the less I needed motivation. Motivation is fuel for hesitation. Clear thinking doesn't require hype. Money became predictable once fear left the equation. Not guaranteed, but understandable. When you know why something works, you stop hoping and start adjusting. I also learned restraint. Not every opportunity deserves attention. Not every idea deserves execution. Choosing what not to do became as important as action itself. Looking back, the shift wasn't dramatic. No single breakthrough, no viral moment. Just hundreds of small decisions made without borrowing other people's thinking. Most people never experience this shift because it's quiet. There's no applause for thinking independently. No external signal telling you you're right. You have to tolerate uncertainty longer than most. That tolerance is rare, which is why real opportunity feels invisible to the crowd. By the time something looks obvious, its advantage is already gone. I didn't escape the system. I stopped letting it think for me. And that made all the difference. Money, in the end, was never the reward. It was the evidence. Evidence that clarity compounds, that positioning matters, that thinking independently has measurable consequences. The hardest part wasn't learning new ideas. It was unlearning borrowed ones. Beliefs inherited without question are expensive. They charge interest daily. I don't think differently to feel superior. I think differently to stay honest. Honesty simplifies decisions, and simple decisions scale better than clever excuses. Most people wait for certainty before acting. I learned to act once confusion narrowed, not disappeared. Progress belongs to those comfortable moving with partial information. If there's a rule I follow now, it's this. If everyone agrees, the opportunity is probably gone. Consensus marks the end of advantage, not the beginning. I didn't become rich by thinking differently. I became free. And money appeared as a side effect of that freedom.